Welcome to Saturday versus Sunday. I'm Geoff Dover. With me is John Barban. Let's talk football.
All right, we're talking about the NFL draft, and we're going to focus on the QBs. This QB class is quite controversial. There's no obvious, it's not like there's an overwhelming, obvious number one player of the way, like, for instance, in recent memory, Joe Burrow was just so obvious.
Yeah.
Or even, Jaden Daniels, maybe. But this year, it's
that was still, there was no, this year, it's more, everyone talks about QBs. QB's most important position in the NFL. So everyone's going to talk about it. But this year, it's a little weird because no one's rated that high.
No.
And so you're going to talk about it because they're QBs and it's the most important position. But it's weird to see this much talk and, consternation about a QBs that are really not blowing anyone off, like in terms of their evaluation or anything.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we could just jump right into it with what everyone thinks is going to be the number one pick is Cam Ward.
Yeah.
And so how about this? In the last couple of draft years, would Cam Ward have even cracked the top 5 in the Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams year?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was and what's funny about this too is that Tennessee's really going out of its way to say that it's not a sure thing, which I don't know why you would do that when you have the number 1 overall pick. Anyway, I think that in terms of years past, this would be really different other than the fact that it's QBs. And at the end of the day, when you need a QB, you're going to take someone higher than would normally go in general. And it's really going to be the case for this year, or at least in the top 3 picks.
Right. And then there's the Shedeur Sanders question. Some people don't think he's even a first round pick, but he might go in the first round. And again, it might just because there's not much to pick from.
Mm-hmm.
But now we need to dip a bit into history here to remind you that analysts have no idea what they're talking about. And many of the GMs also don't know what they're doing in the NFL. As evidenced by, and I always call it out, the 49ers a couple of years ago traded multiple draft picks to move up to get Trey Lance, who I think has played 3 games in the NFL and turned out to might have been the worst bust in all of the NFL, because in all of draft history, and not, everyone says Jamarcus Russell is the worst, but I don't know that they traded away the farm just to get to him. And if it wasn't for the dumb luck of picking Purdy last, which completely saved them, they could be in the middle of a 5-year complete disaster right now, winning 2 or 3 games a year. And instead, they just a throwaway pick saved their bacon.
Well, and that's an interesting point too, because people forget about, people love to mention the Purdy being picked last and worked out and stuff. And the other thing people point out about draft picks is that when you go later in the draft, or at least later in the round, you're going to a better team, right? So people have always said that about Purdy. Like the 49ers are a good team. Like they had a good defense, they had good skill positions, and that's why he was successful, and that's why you get away with that. But people forget that Trey Lance was there too. So it's not like you automatically put someone in there and it works out if they're in a bit better position, right? So that brings us back to Cam Ward. I don't think Cam Ward is rated that high of a QB. I don't think he's a slam dunk. And I think Tennessee is not very good. So I feel like the chance of it not working out is pretty high because he's not going to a great team in a great position. Whereas, I would have said that about Purdy.
Right. And that's a good point. And that brings us back to, is it the quarterback or is it the place that they land? Does it have to be a marriage between the talent actually having a place where they can flourish? So
I think the only way that works out is when you're like a generational talent at QB, then you can make it work pretty much anywhere. But other than that, you can be an amazing, amazing QB and really struggle. And I think a good example of that is like Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold, right? Like I think anyone succeeding with the Jets is going to be super hard, but Darnold's had a resurgence with the Vikings, and it just shows you what a different situation the team can be in. Like the skills were the same.
Right.
Like his arm talent was the same as, but he was way better in that position. So I think that really is super important.
But with that said, that actually supports the argument that it doesn't matter how good the player is. So the year Mahomes, I think he went 12 overall.
10th?
No, I think it was 12.
Okay.
But Mitch Trubisky went
10th overall, Kansas City.
The Bears that year when the Bears could have taken Mahomes.
Yep.
Are the Bears so bad that Mahomes wouldn't be Mahomes? Like, did he need to have Andy Reid? And if that's and you can't know this,
Hmm.
but the more you look at it, the more it seems like Lamar Jackson, he went 32nd,
Hmm.
but he went to a very good franchise.
Yep.
So would he have floundered if he was with the Jets or the Bears
Hmm.
or the Browns? Like, I guess my point is, does it matter how maybe the generational talent can't overcome a bad organization, no matter how good the player is? But I don't think we have any historic examples of it.
Yeah, I think that it comes. I mean, Troy Aikman went 1-15 in his first year with Dallas, and then he turned out to be really good and stuff. So like
But
it's
that team was stacked front to back.
but 1-15, so they couldn't have been that
Yeah,
stacked
but
at the
he's not
beginning.
Emmitt
So
Smith. He had the best offensive line. He had the best running back. He had awesome wide receivers.
they lost 15 games. Like it's the
But he didn't turn a clown show around. Like, they had to build that team around him. Plus, they had the best defense in the league.
yeah, but if it was the best defense and the best offense, why'd they lose 15 games?
No, what
Like
I'm saying is they didn't have it when he showed up. They built it.
I just okay, I hear you, but he went 1-15 in his
No,
first year with them. Like so it's
not all of them.
not all of them, but it was
Right.
they did, but yeah, they built it. But anyway, I think that so to bring it back to Cam Ward, I think that it's going to be tough for it to be super successful in Tennessee. And I think that, there's multiple factors, obviously, and no one knows the answer because otherwise people wouldn't make bad picks ever. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So, but there's multiple factors involved. It's the situation you're going into. It's what your personality's like. And that's the kind of thing that I think that got analysts into trouble in the past. Right.
Mhm.
So people were really, you were talking about this earlier. People were reticent about Gronkowski and Ray Lewis, right? That and because it's the personality stuff, like they're worried about, and
Mhm.
you don't know if the personality is going to be they're just quirky but they still work hard, or if they're just like crazy. So it reminds me a little bit of Johnny Manziel too. Like the difference between Johnny Manziel and Gronkowski, personality wise, seem pretty similar,
Yeah, right.
but Gronkowski would work really hard and still, like
Yeah.
they really spent the extra time in with Brady, and that's why they were on the same page with all this stuff,
Yeah.
Whereas, and same thing with Kittle. Kittle looks like a bit of a nutball, but is super competitive and tries really hard, and
Yeah.
and I would never have known that until I saw the Netflix thing where like he's got this dad writes him a letter every week and
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
and
yeah.
like that. So you can be weird and you have a bus with stuff on the outside, but that doesn't stop you from being super competitive. So
Yeah,
anyway,
it's like there's still something missing in their calculations as to how to evaluate a player.
yeah.
So, I mean, we did a bunch of research on analysts hitting and missing on their predictions, and then teams hitting and missing. And when you hear some of the stuff they say, it's like, for instance, Dak Prescott. He's the highest paid quarterback in the NFL right now. But he was 3-star out of high school. He was seen as a developmental QB but he had some leadership, but he was only a dual threat player, and he played in a run heavy offense that doesn't really prepare you for the NFL. And so moderate expectations. And a lot of these people thought he was a career backup, it says here.
Mm-hmm.
He's the highest paid player in the NFL right now.
Mm-hmm.
So these analysts, you couldn't miss any worse than that. Career backup to the number one paid QB in the NFL. That's quite a big difference between what they thought than what he turned out to be. So is it that he landed in the right place with the right coach? I don't know if Dallas is like the best place right
the
now.
point that you just made about Aikman, I'd say the same thing about Prescott. Like there was a pretty good team and a pretty good offensive line and a really good defense. So,
Yeah.
that for sure helps.
Right. And then, so it's,
Do you think Cam Ward's going to work out?
My point is no one knows.
Okay.
Whoever drafts him won't know. The analysts don't know, and the fans don't know. Because these people thought Brady was a system quarterback who was just going to just be a backup.
Mm-hmm.
You could go down the list. I'm just looking at a list of players here. They have a criticism. There was almost no. Joe Burrow is the only person in recent memory where the consensus from all teams and all analysts are like, oh yeah, that's a franchise QB. But everyone else, they have all of these. Oh, he's got shortcomings with his leadership. He's got shortcomings with, like, Drew Brees. He's too short.
Right. Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that you would think if analysts knew what they were talking about and were good at predicting success, then essentially the draft should go in order of like rookie of the year. Like number 1's rookie of the year. Number 2 is like second in rookie of the year. Like number 3 is third. You know what I mean? Because that should be representative of like how good they are. And it's in what do you think of that?
Well, at least more consistent than how badly they miss.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Like yeah, the first round more or less should be picked as they predicted and should
Yeah.
actually work out as they predicted. But instead, it's not even close. And
Right.
not, I mean, I'm talking about the analysts, but it's even more dramatic when the teams get it that wrong too. Like Trey
Yeah, for
Lance is
sure.
a perfect example of how wrong they were.
So here's a good thing for this year's draft, okay? For the 2025 draft, there isn't a consensus like number one, well, Cam Ward is arguably the consensus number one, but that's just because of, more of an exclusion thing, like that there's
Yeah.
no one else, like it's just him because, by default.
Mhm.
So in this case, your argument would be you should absolutely not take a QB number one overall because you don't know if that's going to work out just as well or if not worse than the second round QB or the third round QB you get.
Or the
And you're
sixth
going to have
round
to
or
pay the
yep.
first round person a lot more money.
Yeah.
So really in this case, this year's draft, no QB should really go within top 20.
Trade out of there.
Because the difference, like the chance of Cam Ward working out or Shuck is probably the same. I don't know, right? It has to be.
Yeah, to me, the top 6 or 7 QBs
Either
might get based on how analysts hit and or miss or mostly miss and how unsure they are and how whatever the metrics they're using, like all the data they get and from the scouts and all the meetings and all everything, it doesn't add up to much of anything on the other side when you see them hit and miss at about a 50-50 rate. That's a coin flip.
Yeah.
I think the average any NFL's teams, if you just took 20 of their fans, put them together and forced them to pick players for their team, they'd come up with about what the same hit rate as the GMs are coming up with. And give them the same data, have a bunch of scouts talk to them and say, this is what we think, this is what we think. I think any fan could do almost the same job here.
Right. Yeah. No, and it was in a good example that we talked about this before, was the Hard Knocks thing where they said that the owner's 14-year-old kid was like, I think you should get Jane Daniels, and all of a sudden that he looked like the smartest one in the room there. So that was So no, and I think that so following that hypothesis that you can't predict it, it's a coin flip, right? And what we know at this year's draft is that there's not a generational talent in there. So
we don't know that.
Well, okay, but it's not.
We don't know that.
Other
people
than Burrow,
don't think there is one.
But the whole point was that Burrow was a consensus number one, like because he was going to be that good. There's no one like that in this draft. Is my point.
There's no one that they're expecting to be like
right.
that.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. But like for example,
someone could work out to be great, is what you're saying. But but they don't have to be. You could get them in the second round, though. That's the point.
Anywhere.
It doesn't have to be right. So it doesn't have to be picked first overall.
Like
if you were Tennessee, you would take someone else other than a QB.
I would trade out of there if possible. But who wants the number one pick this year?
Right. No one. But what would be the next best thing? You pick like a position. I would argue that the other positions, like sometimes like the left tackle or D tackle or something, like the prediction rate is higher than with a QB.
Yeah. So I mean, there was an economist who did the numbers and said you should always trade out of the first round and never maintain that first pick and trade for more value.
Yes, because the cost outweighs the probability of the success. Just like you're saying, it's a coin flip.
Yeah.
So you'd rather, and if you get out of the first round, like first pick, you'll have multiple other picks. So it's not like right now. Right. So right now, you would say you have one pick for 6 rounds, like per round per 6 rounds, right? The average team would have that. But if you traded out of the first round, first pick, then you could have like 8 or 9 picks total, and all of them are still going to cost you less money with it. The number one pick would be overall, and the chance of it being successful are just as good. So, but if no one wants to do that with Tennessee, then the next best thing would just pick some other position that has a higher hit rate than QB, which is a coin flip.
Yeah, is it a D lineman? Is it an O lineman that you think? But the thing is that might miss too, right? So it's
true, but I mean, I feel like the miss rate is less on some of those other positions. I think
I don't think it's stay at number one and pick somebody else. I think it's get out of there because it's not a valuable pick this year.
Yeah, no, that's probably didn't get good offers from it, but yeah,
I'll bet I'm gonna guess right now that any of the Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Kyle McCord, Tyler Shuck, Quinn Ewers, any of those guys could work out. I don't think it's obvious. I don't think it's obvious that any one of them is better than any of the others.
The comparison for Cam Ward that I heard that I thought was pretty interesting was the Kyler Murray. I've put him in the same vein as that.
But he's way bigger.
Is he?
I don't think he's that. Kyler Murray's like 5'10", something
I
like
didn't
that.
think Cam Ward was that
super
big.
short. Well, he's not that short. One of the knocks on him is not that he's super short. At least I don't think so. But so I guess any fan base, if you get one of those other quarterbacks, I wouldn't be all that worried that we missed on a better one. I don't think it's obvious which one of these guys is actually going to work out, and there's no historical precedence to believe that what the analysts think is correct. I mean, the analysts are perpetually wrong. They didn't think Brady was very good. They didn't think Russell Wilson was very good. I mean, they had criticisms of Drew Brees. Just there were so many players they've missed on that why would you take any of the analysts seriously at this point?
Yeah, Cam Ward 6'2", 219.
Yeah,
so you're right, a bit bigger.
Bit bigger, right?
But in terms of it's the if anyone was able, I remember when Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf, that was like couldn't decide who should go first, like before each other, and they
were interchangeable as far as the analysts were concerned.
That was crazy. No, and so the last thing I'll say about this is that what I'm interested about with this draft is that the supply isn't matching with the demand. Does that make sense? So like I think different teams have like positions they really want, like QB and other stuff. And it doesn't really it's not like if you need a left tackle, I don't know if there's a consensus significantly better left tackle than everyone else. Or do you know what I mean? So like so what's interesting this year is that it's going to be a combination of like who you want would fit for the team versus like best available. And it's not going to match up a lot. And so I think there's going to be a lot more trades this year, because then all of a sudden someone's going to fall down to like 15 that they didn't think was going to be there before. And then you might want to trade up to get it or something. So it's just a weird draft this year because it's deep in positions that are.
It's certain years. What they think is deep. Again, we don't know. Some of these analysts didn't think JJ Watt was going to work out.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's whenever you say, oh, it's deep or not, it's as per the analysts and the pundits saying it's deep or not. They don't know. The whole point is they don't know. And part of it is specifically with quarterbacks, you kind of always think of it of their draft year, which is I think the wrong way to think of it. And it's only because I was doing a bit of research here where I looked and thought, what if you viewed all the quarterbacks in a 3-year stretch, let's say. Then all of a sudden, where's Cam Ward? If you add in last year's picks and the years before, and maybe next year's with whoever's coming out with Arch Manning, like he might be the 12th guy. Maybe not even. Like maybe they'd be like, oh yeah, you wouldn't go anywhere near this guy. So, but since those guys they were either the year before or they're coming the year after. And the team who has to pick now just is going to pick now. But what if the team thinks in terms of maybe the Browns are thinking in terms of, yeah, we're just going to deal with this next year.
Yep.
It's just or the Titans. They might think next year's class is better than this year's, and there's just no point in wasting, to your point, a number one pick and the money that goes with the number one pick, just because this happens to be what's available this year. Anthony Richardson is a perfect example. When he went, in the top 5? And it's starting to look like he had no business being picked anywhere above maybe 5th or 6th round. But that year, he was just one of the only other quarterbacks that was available who had like the high ceiling.
4th overall. Yeah.
4th overall with all of the tools, as it were. But it's not looking like it's going to work out. At least so far, it's been look really, really rough. And he only played 1 year in college. It could also be players aren't staying in college long enough. So the contrast to that's Bo Nix, who's played 65 games in college. And whatever the naysayers said about him, I bet you everybody on the Colts would take him over Richardson.
Yeah,
so
probably.
and he was picked later, so he was cheaper. So it's whatever their algorithm is that they're using, something's missing.
Yeah.
It's not there yet.
I wonder if Tennessee, if someone would be willing to make a deal where they go from 1st to like just picking 9th or 10th or something, because that's saving a lot of money in terms of the, and then you could still get Cam Ward potentially, and it's I don't know, it's weird. The draft is interesting, like you said. That article, The Economist, was interesting because there is a like a market for picks, which
Well,
is which is
I'm just
weird.
thinking, who's the overwhelming non-QB talent this year that anyone would move up to even number one for? I don't think anyone would for that price.
No, it's
Like
Travis
Hunter's
Hunter.
unique, but
Yeah,
you don't know if he's going to turn out or not. Well, you don't know. But for example, a few years ago, Myles Garrett went number one, and most people
yes,
thought that's if you
yes,
could have a safe pick,
yeah,
that's pretty safe.
yeah, exactly. So
So, but
I don't know if Abdul Carter, if you'd put that in the same
no,
category this year.
not the same as Myles Garrett. So,
No,
or when Bosa went second, it was relatively safe to move up to if you were a team that wanted to move up to get Nick Bosa, it's kind of safe looking pick.
yeah,
But other than that, there's no. It's hard to find one that
no, I
seems like
know.
worth moving up for, and especially
No,
this year, it's not obvious at all who you'd move up for.
I'd almost have like just looking at the mock first round draft,
Yeah,
I'd almost rate them like if I was just going to give them a score out of 100, I'd give everyone almost the same number. Does that make sense? Like it's the like in terms of I think about where like Abdul Carter, I think he's good. You know, the Mason Graham, the D tackle for Michigan, I think he was
yeah,
good. The
hmm
Texas DB,
yep,
he's
yep.
good. Tyler Warren, he's good. Like I don't know if I'd say, oh, you for sure have to take Warren ahead of this other guy. Like, you know what I mean? I don't
It
think
only
that.
makes it. I mean, yeah. Unless you feel like you're a player away from winning it all, and
Yeah.
there's a guy right here that fits your scheme perfectly. Um, and then you just, yeah, we're going to move up. We're going to take Mason Graham. We feel like the interior of our D line is all that's missing.
Yeah.
And then you move up and take, because you have like I'm thinking of a team that has the generational, like the Bengals. They
Hmm.
have the generational quarterback. They have the offense. They've just signed both receivers, and nobody's thinking about this. They signed Gesicki, so they have the tight end. So
Hmm.
that offense should be able to outscore pretty much anyone,
Hmm.
but the defense is weak. So that to me is a team, well, whether or not they can afford it, but to me, that's the sort of team. It's like, oh, we need to guarantee a couple of defensive players. We just have to have a couple of defensive players, and we're right there. Like they lost a bunch of one-score games that all they needed was to hold up just a
Yeah.
little bit, like just a little bit
Yeah.
on defense.
No, and
Like,
that comes back to the supply and demand thing. I think that
yeah,
they're gonna for sure take like even if the best player available at the time is like a tight end, they're gonna take a defensive player at their position, you know,
have
and
to.
then and
You have to.
I think there's a few teams like that. And so that's why some of the really talented or highly rated people are gonna drop because of something like that this year more than other years.
Oh,
So
drafting on need
yeah,
versus
like
the best
because
player on the
and then
board.
it's
Yeah.
gonna put a team in a jam where you're like, we didn't think this guy would be available at this point, but they are now. And so should we take that or should we stick with what we need? I think that a lot of teams can be facing that this year.
Yeah, and this only makes sense when you have the generational quarterback. If you don't have that, kind of it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Like you said, if there's like Myles Garrett would seem to be like a pretty much can't miss thing at that point. And same with
right.
but I think and there was a Baselli, I think there was a left tackle where everyone was like, yeah, he's going to be, you know, you
I
can,
mean, every now and then
but
there's a.
yeah,
I mean, you would always take if a tackle seems to have all of the measurables and seems to have the talent, you always take the tackle.
yeah.
But I
So,
don't think there's one that's that overwhelming. And the few that are really good this year, all seem to have come back from a pretty bad injury.
mhm,
So many of them, it's like, oh man, he was great, but then he spent half the year injured, and
yeah.
it's just you just don't know what you're going to get. So, I mean, I don't know what to make of this draft. Like I'm doing the same thing. I'm going through this list here, and nobody jumps off the page. I mean, the person to me that in college, other than Travis Hunter, that just jumps off the page is Ashton Genty. But you just
Mhm.
don't take running backs in the first round, as
Yeah.
evidenced by some of the greatest running backs ever were late round picks, like Terrell
Mhm.
Davis. You can just get production without spending any draft capital on it. So it's
Yeah, the only thing that jumped off me in the list, like the first round list, was the McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona, going like 12th. I think he's really good, and I think you could have, you know, having a really good wide receiver could be a real difference maker. So I was a little surprised at that, but I mean, I wouldn't, like I said, I think all the ratings for all the first round people is pretty close this year.
yeah. And then I think there's a bunch of receivers that are all interchangeable here that all could be good.
Hmm.
Again, the analysts didn't think Mike Evans was going to be good. So
Yeah.
who knows? Like who knows? Like they just don't know.
Hmm.
So anyways, I guess what we're getting at is no matter how the draft unfolds for your team, don't really get too upset about it or excited about it because all of it's a complete crapshoot and no one actually knows if any of these players are actually going to be good. And all you got to do is look back historically and see what people thought of the best players and realize they didn't know. No one knew Brady was going to be good. No one knew Purdy was going to be good. They had all kinds of question marks about Jalen Hurts. They had question marks about Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
They were saying he played in an air raid offense that doesn't prepare you for the NFL, and now looks like the second coming of he's it. He's the greatest.
People are
right
making
now.
the argument that he's the greatest of all time.
Well, he's on his way. He's on his way. He's won 7. He's been to won 3 Super Bowls, been to 4 or 5, won 7. He's been in the AFC Championship game 7 years in a row. But the analysts are like, I don't know. He just plays in an air raid offense. He's too risky. Now, they said he's high risk, high reward, but they just, not ready for the NFL. Well, he was pretty goddamn ready when he showed up. So,
well, and then, so as a fan, as soon as the draft's done, which is on Sunday, they'll post their grades, right, in the draft grades. And so as a fan, you don't worry about that too much, because
it's meaningless. It's totally
they could be wrong on those. And, if you think you had a good draft or not, we're not going to know until after they start playing.
Yep. All right. So then I guess lastly, do you have like a sleeper you think, any position that a player you just remember from college you just think is going to pop that people really aren't talking about?
No, I think I said it with the McMillan going down to 12, because I think having a really good wide receiver in the NFL is really important. So I would have had him rated a little bit earlier. And I think that with looking just at the mock draft part, seeing Walter Nolan all the way down to 30th in the Bills, like he's been really good for a lot. And I think that, again, the D tackle thing is such an important position. I think that would go, I think that'd be a perfect fit for Buffalo. So
yeah, I think so. The one of the players I think will pop that people aren't talking about is Jaden Higgins from Iowa State, the receiver.
Oh, that's a good one.
They have 2 good receivers, but I think he's going to turn out. It's just a guess, but I think he might turn out to be your Mike Evans that just is there, just all like long career, lots of catches. People just didn't think about it, and then 6 or 7 years from now, they're like, wait, which guy was that again? Like, where was he in the draft? And but he's just a perennial, like, great NFL player. I think he could be that type of guy that, McMillan's getting the chatter, but I think Higgins might be the guy. So we'll see.
That's a good one.
All right. I don't think that's a good place to leave it.
Yep.
All right. Well, this will be interesting to see what happens at the draft. All right. We'll catch you later.